Hi. Hi. Morning. Okay, so I'm Ruth, for those of you that don't know me. Hello. And John has asked me to preach this morning on a passage, and I kind of didn't answer him for weeks after he'd asked me because I was really trying to figure out if I actually thought I had anything to bring to it. So I do feel like God has given me something. So I do hope that what I have to share would bless you or help you or wherever you are. So I'm just going to pray most of myself before we start. So Lord, I just want to thank you so much for this morning. I thank you so much for everyone that is here. And I just pray, Lord, that as I speak, that you will guide my words, that the message that you have kind of shown me is what I'm able to bring across, Lord, and that we're all able to be blessed by your word and your love this morning, Lord. Amen. So, my job as a teacher is to, well, apart from crowd control, is to take complicated things and make them simple and break things down and try and make it fairly bite-sized and everything. And in my recent job, I had to teach RE to every class in the school, and I was like, I've got this. I have been a Christian since I was 5. I know all of the things, not all of them, but I know most of the things. So this should be really easy for me, and actually I was like, I'm good that these children had someone who, knew the Bible and was able to kind of give it along in a way that, I actually knew what it all meant and how it all linked in, and I thought, great. And then I sat down with a class of primary 3s and tried to teach them about parables, and I was like, this is really hard to teach parables to children that have barely ever heard of Jesus, apart from he was probably born around Christmas and Santa was his brother. That was kind of the level we were dealing with here. And so I think it was quite a good experience of what I take for granted in my own knowledge of the Bible and stories that I've heard time and time again, and how to translate that to people that have no understanding or no kind of foundation knowledge, and kind of peeling everything back to the start. So that was really challenging this year, but also really exciting, as a teacher, but also as a Christian, to how I translate my faith across. So the passage that John has asked me to speak on today is the road to Emmaus, and some of you might have never heard of this passage before. Some of you have potentially heard it every year round about Easter, for many years. So I do hope that what I have to say about it will help you in your faith if you've heard it many times before. So I'm just going to read the passage. It seems like a really good start. So it is Luke chapter 24, verses 13 to 35. I'm assuming that, yeah, cool. So, now that same day, 2 of them were going to a village called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem. They were talking with each other about everything that had happened. As they talked and discussed these things with each other, Jesus himself came up and walked along with them, but they were kept from recognizing him. He asked them, "What are you discussing together as you walk along?" They stood still, their faces downcast. One of them, named Cleopas, asked him, "Are you only a visitor to Jerusalem and do not know these things that have happened there in these days?" "What things?" he asked. "About Jesus of Nazareth," they replied. "He was a prophet, powerful in word and deed before God and all the people. The chief priests and our rulers handed him over to be sentenced to death, and they crucified him. But we had hoped that he was the one who was going to redeem Israel. And what is more, it is the 3rd day since all this took place. In addition, some of our women amazed us. They went to the tomb early this morning, but didn't find his body. They came and told us that they had seen a vision of angels who said he was alive. Then some of our companions went to the tomb and found it just as the women had said, but him they did not see." He said to them, "How foolish you are, and how slow to believe all that the prophets have spoken. Did not the Messiah have to suffer these things and then enter his glory?" And beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he explained to them what was said in all the scriptures concerning himself. As they approached the village to which they were going, Jesus continued on as if he were going further. But they urged him strongly, "Stay with us, for it is nearly evening, the day is almost over." So he went in to stay with them. When he was at the table with them, he took bread, gave thanks, broke it, and began to give it to them. Then their eyes were opened, and they recognized him, and he disappeared from their sight. They asked each other, "Were not our hearts burning within us while he talked with us on the road and opened the scriptures to us?" They got up and returned at once to Jerusalem. There they found the 11, and those with them assembled together, and saying, "It is true, the Lord has risen and has appeared to Simon." Then the two told what had happened on the way, and how Jesus was recognized by them when he broke the bread. So, that is the passage. And several things jump out from that passage to me. The first, well, I'll leave the main one because that's kind of what I'm talking about. But the thing is, first of all, I would love to have been at that sermon. Like, how amazing would that have been to just literally have Jesus explain the Bible and how everything pertained to him and how it all fit in. I just wish that I had been there. And I wish there had been slightly more detail in the passage about what he actually said. The next thing I love is just the concept that Jesus was like, "No, I'm just going to keep going." Like, what did that look like? Of Jesus just went, "No, it's okay, you guys, I'll just go." And they're like, "No, stay." He's like, "No, I'm just going." I just think that's quite funny. Sorry, that's just me. So the main thing that I wanted to focus on, the main thing that stood out to me, and what I kind of feel God was leading me to in this passage, is the verse 16, where it says, "But they were kept from recognising him." Like, that just, what did that look like? How could you not recognise somebody you had spent probably every day, whether most of your days for 3 years, and you'd followed around and you'd put down your entire life on hold to follow this person, but you didn't recognise him? It's not that they didn't recognise him, it's that they were kept from recognising him. Like, he purposely withheld his identity from them. And I just really was trying to work, why? Why would God have done that? Why would he not have revealed himself? There was other people he revealed himself to. Why did he not reveal himself to these men? And as I was kind of thinking about it, I was thinking that potentially the reason why, or my understanding of the reason why, is so that they would listen. Because if they, we hear in the passage that they were really upset, they were really sad, they were obviously trying to grapple with what had just happened. They were spending a lot of their time discussing all of the things that had come, and it says they were downcast. And so if Jesus had just kind of shown up, I imagine they would have had overwhelming emotional reactions. They would have just been in complete awe, potentially terrified, and not in a place to listen. Like, again, as a teacher, I know myself, if I've got news I need to tell my class, it's either really exciting or really sad, I'll wait till just before break time or lunchtime or home time so that they can go and process it, because there's no way I'm going to be able to then go, "Right, fractions," and teach a lesson immediately afterwards, because they're just not going to be in a place to listen, to hear what I have got to say. So I was kind of trying to think, well, so that they would be able to hear, so that they were listening, and they did say that their hearts burned within them, so, their spirits were probably responding to what Jesus was saying, but they themselves were withheld from listening and then it says, and then their eyes were open. So when he broke the bread and he did the communion, they recognised him. And then he disappeared, and again, it's just, the Bible just has just such a very simple way of saying huge things. And then he disappeared from their sight. That's all we know about that. I just want to know what that looked like. So then, as I was kind of thinking about this God withholding himself, God withholding his identity from people, and then I kind of started thinking about other occasions in the Bible when that had happened. So we're just going to do a very quick whistle-top tour, very quick, through some passages. I think I told John I had 5 passages, and they had a little but I'll keep it within time, don't you worry, John. So the next passage is not far away. It is Luke 24, 36 to 43. So this is immediately after the road to Emmaus. So, while they were still talking about this, Jesus himself stood among them and said to them, "Peace be with you." They were startled and frightened, thinking they saw a ghost. He said to them, "Why are you troubled, and why do doubts rise in your minds? Look at my hands and my feet. It is I myself. Touch me and see. A ghost does not have flesh and bones, as you see I have." When he had said this, he showed them his hands and feet, and while they still did not believe it because of joy and amazement, he asked them, "Do you have anything here to eat?" And then he gave them a piece of broiled fish, and he took it and ate in their presence. So this is slightly different from the road to Emmaus. It wasn't Jesus actively withholding his identity, it was that they just were not in a position to believe what was in front of their eyes. And so this is kind of my question, like, why did they not recognise Jesus? And on this occasion, I think it was just too good to be true. They'd heard, like, they'd obviously just had the account of the people from who just bolted back from Emmaus. They'd had the account of the women at the tomb in the morning, and they were still not up for believing that Jesus had risen again. And so, yeah, so that's kind of where it was just too good to be true. And it says they thought it was a ghost, and they were terrified and they were frightened. So again, we have that overwhelming emotional reaction. So the next passage in which we'll look at is in John chapter 20, verse 11 to 18. So this is probably, I just realised, like, kind of got into what I'm doing and hadn't maybe given some context to this. So this is obviously the aftermath of Easter, when Jesus has been crucified and has been laid in a tomb, and 3 days later he has risen to life. And so these are the first encounters of people afterwards. Probably should have said that. That's okay. So we've got, this is, because it's in a different book, this is kind of prior to the disciples having seen him. So this is when the women had gone to the tomb. So it says, "Now Mary stood outside the tomb crying. As she wept, she bent over to look into the tomb and saw 2 angels in white, seated where Jesus' body had been, one at the head and the other at the foot. They asked her, 'Woman, why are you crying?' 'They have taken my Lord away,' she said, 'and I don't know where they have put him.' At this, she turned round and saw Jesus standing there, but she did not realise that it was Jesus. He asked her, 'Woman, why are you crying? Who is it you are looking for?' Thinking he was the gardener, she said, 'Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have put him, and I will get him.' Jesus said to her, 'Mary.' She turned around towards him, and cried out in Aramaic, 'Rabboni,' which means teacher. Jesus said, 'Do not hold on to me.'" So that's kind of, yeah, sorry, I will read that, but that's not kind of relevant. So Jesus said, "Do not hold on to me, for I have not yet ascended to the Father. Go instead to my brothers and tell them, I am ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God." Mary Magdalene went to the disciples with the news, "I have seen the Lord," and she told them that he had said these things to her. So we have a slightly different one there, where somebody is again looking at Jesus and not recognising him. But in this occasion, there's nothing to lead us to believe that she's been withheld from recognising him, that he's purposefully hidden his identity. She's just not recognised him, and she's mistaken him for the gardener. And it says that she looked at him but did not realise that it was Jesus. So then, why did she not recognise him again? This woman has followed him around, has given up her life to just follow this man, and is absolutely distraught that he was killed. And for me, she was just too upset. She was just completely preoccupied with her own grief and her own emotion and the situation, that she just could not focus on what was literally standing right in front of her. Next, I've got a point for all this, I promise. But the next one we're going to go through. So next chapter, so it's John chapter 21. I have said verse 1 to 14, but I'm going to, I think, cut the head and the feet off this one. So I'm going to start at verse 3. "I'm going out to fish," Simon Peter told them, and they said, "We'll go with you." So they went out and got into the boat, but that night they caught nothing. Early in the morning, Jesus stood on the shore, but the disciples did not realise that it was Jesus. He called out to them, "Friends, haven't you any fish?" "No," they answered. He said, "Throw your net on the right side of the boat and you will find some." When they did, they were unable to haul the net in because of the large number of fish. Then the disciple whom Jesus loved said to Peter, "It is the Lord." As soon as Simon Peter heard him say, "It is the Lord," he wrapped his outer garment around him, for he had taken it off, and jumped into the water. The other disciples followed in the boat, towing the net full of fish, for they were not far from shore, about 100 metres. When they landed and saw a fire of burning coals, there were fish on it, and some bread. Jesus said to them, "Bring some of the fish you have caught." Simon Peter climbed aboard and dragged the net ashore. It was full of fish, 153, but even with so many in the net was not torn. Jesus said to them, "Come and have breakfast." None of the disciples dared ask him, "Who are you?" They knew it was the Lord. I'll just stop there. So this one, again, slightly different. So Jesus was on the shore, they were in their boats, and they didn't realise it was Jesus. Now, he's obviously able to communicate with them, they're able to communicate with him, and they still haven't recognised his voice. So again, being preoccupied with what they were doing, they've not recognised him. And then they do recognise, this is the kind of bit in this that I thought was really interesting, they do recognise, and Peter obviously has a very Peter reaction to the situation and just jumps out the boat. And it's just a bit in verse 12 that I thought was really weird, where it says that none of the disciples dared ask him, "Who are you?" for they knew it was Jesus. So why would that have been a consideration to ask, "Who are you?" Like, I don't greet my family all the time, but "Who are you?" Just checking. Like, because we know, I know the people that I spend all my time with, I know who they are, and these guys spent all their time with Jesus, so why would it have even been a consideration to ask him who he was? So again, was he kind of hiding his identity from them? Was there this kind of sense that he was withholding a bit of himself from them? So, and in this one it seems that why would they ask that? Why would they be considering that? It's because they were scared. Again, it's maybe this too good to be true kind of situation where they just couldn't quite believe. And I mean, by this point we've had several accounts of Jesus having come back. So, it's just too scared to believe what's right in front of them. And then the last one, the last passage I want to look at is different. So all of these accounts have been from Jesus after the resurrection, the kind of first encounters with his disciples and his followers and their reactions to him. This is Old Testament, this is 1 Samuel 3, this is the other kind of account I could think of from the Bible where somebody did not recognise God initially. So it's 1 Samuel chapter 3, verse 4 to 10. And context, this is Samuel is a child under the care of a man called Eli, and he is very young. I believe like toddler age, it's like 3 or 4? 3? 3, thank you. Just checking. So, then the Lord called Samuel. Samuel answered, "Here I am," and he ran to Eli and said, "Here I am, you called me?" But Eli said, "I did not call. Go back and lie down." So he went and lay down. Again the Lord called, "Samuel," and Samuel got up and went to Eli and said, "Here I am, you called me?" "My son," Eli said, "I did not call. Go back and lie down." Now Samuel did not yet know the Lord. The word of the Lord had not yet been revealed to him. A third time the Lord called, "Samuel," and Samuel got up and went to Eli and said, "Here I am, you called me?" Then Eli realised that the Lord was calling the boy. So Eli told Samuel, "Go and lie down, and if he calls you, say, 'Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening.'" So Samuel went and lay down in his place. The Lord came and stood there, calling as at the other times, "Samuel, Samuel." Then Samuel said, "Speak, for your servant is listening." And then he gave them some pretty bad news, we're not going to go into that. But what I got again from that was, there's another account of God physically talking to somebody, and it then says he stood there. So again, you just really want to know what that was like. And somebody not recognising. And in this instance for Samuel, it was a kind of spiritual immaturity. It was the word of the Lord had not yet been revealed to him. He was very, very young. He required somebody. It's not an age thing in this instance. I would say it's a spiritual age as opposed to a chronological age. With somebody that was spiritually older, going, "Oh, that's God." And to be honest, if Freya, we've not been brave enough to take the sides off the cot yet, but if Freya was to just keep rocking out of bed, and yeah, I would be fairly annoyed. I don't know how many times it would take for me to consider that maybe it's God calling her, not just an excuse to get out of bed. So it's just, yeah, a very interesting moment for it to click in Eli's head that actually the Lord was speaking to his 3-year-old charge. So the point of why I have gone through many passages in the Bible and focusing on instances when God has either withheld his identity or people have not recognised him, is the question, and this is the kind of thing that I felt God kind of wanted me to consider, and John asking me to focus on the passage, is when in my life have I not recognised God? Like, when have I been in some situation and God has been there and I have not seen him? I've not noticed him, he's been speaking to me and I've not heard him, or I've not recognised his voice. And so that's kind of what I wanted to consider. The examples I've given, the first 4, were all people that knew Jesus, and not just the way that we know Jesus, but like a physical person that they hung out with and ate with and walked with and did all of these things. They knew him and they still did not recognise him, either because he himself wanted them to pay attention to what he's actually saying, or because they just were overcome with emotion. And so that kind of makes me think, when have I been so preoccupied with a situation, something that I'm going through, something, usually it's negative, but even the positive things, and I've been so overwhelmed with my own emotion, or so overwhelmed with the situation, that I've not thought to pay attention to where God is within that. And from these passages, you know, the road to Emmaus, I think they were kept from listening, kept from recognising God, so that they would listen to him. And so in times when we feel like, where is God? Like, I just don't seem to feel his presence. Like, where is he? Where is he gone? He's not here. Is there something else that we're needing to be taught in those situations? Is there something else that needs to happen first before that connection is made? With the disciples, when Jesus appeared to them and they thought he was a ghost, you know, it was that kind of fear of it being too good to be true. Of other times when the solution or something comes up and we're just scared, because it would require faith. For the disciples, it would require a recognition that Jesus had been resurrected from the dead. That's huge. You know, and we get so, this is what I was saying at the beginning when I was talking about parables and just things that, you know, like stories that I've known for so many years. And of course seeds are the word of God, and of course weeds are people stamping on it. And actually when I'm trying to relay that information to people that don't recognise or aren't used to it, it sounds slightly bonkers. And so for the disciples to really be faced with the resurrection, and to really be faced with the fact that and we've also seen loads of miracles, but to be faced with the man that they've hung out with, and they've then realised he actually is the Son of God. It's just not just a lovely title that some people have given to him. He actually is the Son of God, and he actually is alive again. And so this too good to be true sense. And I suppose I identified most with Mary, just being far too upset to see what's in front of me, being overwhelmed with my own emotion and my own situation, to see God. Because, you know, if we are believing in what the Bible is saying, then we believe that God is always with us, that he does not forsake us, that he loves us as far as the east is from the west, that he has made us in his image. And so these truths are true when we feel like them and when we don't. And so when is it that I've been in situations that have been so difficult and trying to figure out where God is, and then kind of going, well, he's not here. And so this is kind of where I've tried to figure this out. And for Justin and I, we've been together 8 years now, and a lot of our relationship, a lot of moments, we've kind of stopped and tried to really look back on things that have happened that were horrible at the time, or really difficult, or really frustrating, or not great, and go, oh, if that hadn't happened, this wouldn't happen. Like, that's what God was doing there, and we were too close to the situation to see it. We were too preoccupied with the fact the situation really wasn't enjoyable for us in that time, that we didn't even think to consider that that was something maybe we needed to go through, or we needed to learn through, or we needed to accept that God was doing something, that we had not been abandoned to the situation, that God was there. And so, from looking at all of this and considering all of this, my question for myself is, well, what does that mean from now? Like, it's all very well looking back and going, oh, there was God. You know, the disciples on the road from Emmaus probably, well, obviously that was Jesus, because he knew everything about everything, and he was so wise, and he preached the exact same way we heard him preach so many times before. Of course that was Jesus. You know, so how many times is it hindsight that I'm learning about God through? Like, my challenge to myself and looking at this is, how can I learn at the time? Like, how can I be in the moment, learning and recognising God and seeing him present in the situation? And I'm sorry, I don't have like an answer for that. Like, I don't have a, like, here's what you do, you step 1, step 2, step 3. Like, I think it's just very much a kind of growing and learning in my own faith and my own understanding of who God is. And, you know, recently, to be very honest with you, you know, in the sake of transparency, is that I've not felt as close to God as I once did when I was younger, and that's again something that I've really wrestled with and grappled with. And there was a point a few years ago where it was the, do I actually believe this? Like, do I actually stand and hold on to everything that I have said and believed since, as I said, a very young age? Is it my parents' faith that I am, you know, riding the coattails of? The answer was no. Well, it wasn't. If anybody knows me at all, you know that I'm not easily led. So I kind of did reach the conclusion that my faith was built upon my own experiences and the times that I had met with Jesus and encountered God, and therefore my faith became a choice. That when there are really difficult situations and I have overwhelming emotions about something, that doesn't diminish the faith that I have, that doesn't remove the belief that I believe that God is still there, that he's still present in that moment. Obviously the kind of, well, obviously some, but the most recent really difficult one would be my mum getting cancer and trying to work out what in the world that had to do. And that was something that my parents really struggled through. Was, for those of you that don't know, my mum and dad are in South Africa working for the Lord there in communities and township communities in Cape Town, and they'd literally just got there. Like, they'd been there I think like a year and a bit before realising my mum had cancer and needed to come back for 6 months. And that was a huge question of why. Like, why? And so trying so hard to go, God, where are you in this situation? Like, what is the point of all of this? Because we've just got here, we've just got started. You know, it took them ages to kind of establish themselves, and you're removing us. And so we just had to trust that there was a reason, that in that situation that God had something that he was either trying to teach them, or what I kind of said, what I kind of felt is that actually it's your absence that some other people need to feel just now, to kind of get their own mojo back, as it were. Like, they need to kind of realise what you bring by having you removed. And so, it's a very harsh way of doing it, but it's effective. But yeah, so that's kind of the two questions that I want to leave you with. 15 minutes already. When in my life have I not recognised God in a situation? Like, we're all able to cast our minds back. When have we missed God? When has he been standing there in front of us and we've not recognised him? Until later, whether the next day or years down the line, or after the situation is no longer a situation, it's very much in the past. And then the challenge, which I don't have an answer to, looking forward, when and how can I ensure that in situations that are difficult and challenging and I have strong emotions and maybe I'm in the best place to listen, like, when can I recognise God in them? How can I put my faith at the forefront of my emotions and the situation and just the overwhelming chaos that life is sometimes, and see God within that? I don't have an answer, I'm sorry. That's kind of gauntlet thrown down for you guys. I'm going to pray now, and then the band will come up, and in the corner over there is prayer. I always plug prayer ministry because it's great, right? So there's prayer ministry over there. So if anything that I have said has challenged you or been relevant to you, then I do encourage you to go and speak to prayer ministry, and they will pray for you. And it's always wonderful and encouraging. And if nothing I've said makes any difference in your life, but you have other things you'd like to pray for, they're still there as well. Okay, so either way, just go and get prayer. It's always great. So I'm just going to pray. Lord, I just want to thank you so much for these accounts that we can see in the Bible, where we can see that people that knew you as a person still didn't recognise you, and so that kind of gives us a little bit of grace when we miss you as well. But I just pray that you will help us to really notice where you are in situations, Lord, to notice when you're standing beside us and in front of us, and that we'll hold on to the truths in the Bible about your presence and how you don't leave us, and you're always walking with us, and you're always there for us, and you're always listening. So, Lord, I just want to ask that if anyone here is going through an overwhelming situation, or they're feeling far from you and they're struggling to place where you are, that you will make your presence known, that you will reveal where you are, and you will reveal your identity to them, Lord. And I just ask that for the prayer ministry team, Lord, if people are going and asking for prayer, that you will give them wisdom and discernment and encourage them. And yeah, as a fellowship, that we can be really honest with each other about where we are, and build each other up, and help each other in our faith. Just like Samuel required somebody that was more spiritually wise to guide him, to tell him what he needed to do, that you will help us to help one another and to encourage one another in our faith, Lord. Amen.